Okay. Hopefully nothing goes wrong this time, but let's try. Uh, share screen. Slideshow. Okay. 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 So disorder is associated with the immune system. Okay. Okay. So the immune system can either overreact or underreact. Overreacting is hypersensitivity. Underreacting is hyposensitivity. Okay. So let's go through all this. Okay. Um, okay. Dysbiosis is an imbalance that causes enough adverse effects. Okay. Uh, in humans. Okay. For example, antibiotic therapy kills the normal gut microbiota, which causes C. diff to to proliferate and cause disease. Okay. Um, it's a possible cause of inflammatory bowel diseases, IBD, inflammatory bowel diseases, such as ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. Okay. Um, so more and more people are diagnosed with asthma and other allergies that didn't simply exist before. And like from my generation, it was a thing, but it was a very rare thing. Um, in the newer generations, this seems to be more and more common. Like you can't have peanut butter in school anymore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and that's possibly due to like having less exposure to microbes as a child. Because one of the things that happens as a child, especially as an infant, is you set what normal is. Okay, little babies don't really have that much of an immune system. Their bodies are trying to determine what normal is, and then um, after that, anything that's not normal causes disease, but they have to set what normal is first. Okay, and so if you're not exposed to a wide variety of things early, then your definition of normal is very narrow, and therefore other things can affect you. Okay. Okay. Uh, okay. So the big picture, you can use fecal transplants for C. diff infections. That is restoring the normal microbiota. Basically, is usually what you take is a gut microbiota from someone who's living with you or close to you somehow. So then transplant into you. Okay. Uh, all right. Hypersensitivity is energetic response beyond normal. Um, and it occurs when sensitized by previous exposure to an allergen. Okay, an allergen is a antigen that causes an allergy, which is something that's not supposed to happen, basically. Okay, um, the study of hypersensitivity is immunopathology. Okay, things go wrong with the immune system. The hygiene hypothesis: if you're too clean in early childhood, like let the kid play in dirt for a while. Like we try to wrap them up in a bubble. Like I remember one of my friends, like the first time I saw babies, they're like, "Oh, make sure you wash your hands before you touch the kid." And like, unless you're particularly dirty or something, that's not really helpful. Okay, kids should be exposed to dirt. Everything they touch ends up in their mouth, and that's okay. as long as it's not actually toxic and stuff like that. So, okay. Okay, so you can see that type 1 is type 4, okay, and the signs, the amount of times this is actually kind of important. That's why it's type 4. Okay. Okay, so type 1 is the peanut butter allergy or the shrimp allergy and stuff like that. Type 1 is also called anaphylaxis or anaphylactic shock. Okay. Um, the antigens combined with IgE. Okay. The IgE antibodies attaches to mast cells and basophils, and they release massive amounts of histamine and leukotrienes and prostaglandins. Okay. So the redness, swelling that you see, the mucus secretions in the lungs and airways and stuff like that. Okay. Okay. So mast cells bind. You have antibodies. Antibodies bind to the allergen, and what happens is when the allergen attaches to different IgEs, the IgEs kind of bind to the mast cell much better, so they start sticking to mast cells, and then they start releasing massive amounts of histamine. Okay. Okay. So systemic anaphylaxis is anaphylactic shock. This is they're exposed to allergens a couple of times, and it can actually cause circulatory collapse and death. Like when you go into anaphylactic shock, so much your blood vessels open so wide and so much fluid leaks out of your blood vessels. You don't have enough fluid inside your blood vessels to continue your circulatory system, and you go in circulatory collapse and death. Okay, it's treated with epinephrine. I'm sure you have seen either in real life or in TV shows where they inject that needle of epinephrine in person's side. Okay. So localized anaphylaxis is that localized area. Okay. Okay. So this is pollen grains. Okay. So hay fever. People have like allergies in the spring, usually pollen grains. This is dust. This is a house dust mite. My child is actually allergic to these things. Not the mite itself, but their secretions actually. That's what causes the allergic response. And so, I don't have any carpet or anything in my house, so we can reduce the number of house mites. So, okay. Okay. The antigens are the testing. So let me show you a picture of testing. Basically, this is what happens actually. So you can tell, usually the first two are controls. So these two are like controls. This is actually histamine like being injected into you. So things that look like the histamine response is probably allergy. So this one, he's allergic to this one probably. This one, the rest are too kind of light. Probably that thing as well. This one is not clear, but you can see like which ones they're allergic to. Okay. Okay. Type 2 is cells. Okay. Uh, okay. So what happens is cells get inside your body that are foreign cells, okay, and they get attacked by IgG or IgM. This causes massive amounts of cellular lysis and damage by macrophages, and generally the amount of lysis and toxicity in your blood goes up, way up, and that causes other problems. Okay, ABO blood type system. Okay, works that way. So I'm type A. If I receive type B blood, my bloodstream already has anti B antibodies to it, and so it will kill those blood cells. And if it's just a little bit, then it doesn't matter. But if there's a lot, the lysing open of those blood cells will release a lot of toxins and cause a lot of damage. Okay? Type O people have no antigens, and therefore any antigen that enters in, whether A or B, will cause a reaction. Okay? So you can see this thing right here. Okay. Okay, so RH factor. Okay, RH factor is found on red blood cells of 85% of the people, which means 15% do not have RH positive cells. Okay, RH positive blood given to a RH negative recipient will stimulate anti-RH. Okay, not the other way around. Okay, okay. Usually this doesn't matter, except in a case called a hemolytic disease on a newborn. Okay, so what happens from hemolytic disease? So you have a RH positive father. Okay, you have an RH negative mother, and if the fetus is RH negative, then it doesn't matter. Okay, the problem occurs when you have a child that is RH positive. Okay, during the first pregnancy, not much happens. And the reason why not much happens is because the bloodstream of the fetus and female, they don't cross. Okay, so your female body doesn't develop immunity to RH plus during the pregnancy. At childbirth, that is very different. At childbirth, the baby's bleeding, the mother's bleeding, there's blood everywhere, there's blood mixing everywhere. Okay, and believe me, there's a lot of blood. So there's a lot of mixing of blood between mother and baby. The mother is RH minus, the baby's RH positive. The mother will develop immunity to RH factor there. And therefore, if she gets pregnant a second time, okay, then her antibodies can attack the fetus, the second fetus. Okay, and that will cause hemolysis of the blood cells inside the fetus, so hemolytic disease of the newborn, and the baby will be under oxygenated. They can have other problems in development. Okay, what they actually do really is they give the mother, if so, when you're pregnant, they blood type you, and if you're RH minus and the baby is RH positive, or even the baby is possibly RH positive, you get an injection of something called ROGAM. Okay, ROGAM is just antibodies for RH factor. Okay, if they're already in your bloodstream, then your immunity is going to be passive. And if immunity is going to be passive, then you're not going to develop immunity to it. Okay, so every time the mother gets pregnant, another injection of ROGAM. Okay, that will prevent the mother from ever developing immunity, active immunity to RH factor. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll skip the drug induced stuff. Okay. Okay, so type 2 deals with cells. Type 3 deals with soluble antigens in the serum. Okay, they bind, the antibodies bind to serum, things that are in the serum, and they bind to other things. And so what you get are these complexes. Okay, so you have your antigen binding antibody. If that was the only thing that happened, that's fine. But what usually happens is the antigen will bind to multiple antibodies, and multiple antibodies will bind to the same antigen. And therefore, you get these complexes of antigens and antibodies. And soon enough, these antigens and antibodies become too big to float around in the fluid, and they'll settle, and they will settle in capillary beds. Okay, and that will partially block the capillary bed. Okay, but what makes it worse is that if you remember the complex, this end of the complex will attract neutrophils and other white blood cells for oxygen and stuff, and they will secrete things, enzymes that are, the neutrophil treats this thing as a bacteria, and it's not. It's actually your tissue, and it will destroy your tissue. Okay. All right. Type 4 is also known as delayed cell-mediated hypersensitivity. Okay, this is the only cell-mediated immune response that is mediated by T cells. The others are antibodies. This one's T cells, and that's why it takes longer, because T cells have to grow and develop. Okay, so the great example of this is poison ivy or poison oak. Okay, or otherwise as contact dermatitis. Okay, etc. that you develop. So you touch poison ivy gets picked up, and you form an immune system memory response, and therefore you never get poison ivy, the effects of poison ivy the first time you touch poison ivy. It's always the second time that causes the effect. Okay, you see the poison ivy right there. Okay. The primary reason for the delay is the immune cells have to start activating stuff. They'll activate by this platelet. Okay. All right. Okay. So autoimmune diseases. Okay. Autoimmune diseases is the loss of self tolerance. Okay. Our cells, our B cells and T cells, the first thing they're taught is what self is. Okay. And therefore, it usually doesn't ever attack itself. But if we screw that up, then you lose self tolerance. Okay. 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 Multiple sclerosis, MS. Okay. MS is caused by T cells and B cells attacking the myelin. Okay. Graves' disease. Antibodies that bind to thyroid, and that instead of destroying them, they actually cause the binds to the thyroid receptor, and the thyroid thinks is thyroid hormone or thyroid signaling hormone coming in, and that actually makes it make more thyroid hormone. Okay. Okay. Myasthenia gravis, antibodies coat this, choline receptors, which basically acetylcholine can't get in, therefore don't get nerve signal, therefore you don't get contraction. Okay. Okay. Lupus. Um, lupus is caused by type 3, where the immune complexes form and it clogs in the kidney, and the kidney, like the glomerulus of the kidney, will clog, and that will cause damage. Okay, rheumatoid arthritis is an immune the antibodies attacking joint tissue. Okay, okay. Type 1 diabetes is T cell destruction of insulin secreting cells. Okay. Okay. So, okay. So, the major histocompatibility antigens. Okay. We learned a couple chapters ago about MHC. Okay. In humans, this is called something else. It's called HLA. Okay. But they mean the same thing. We just didn't know they were the same thing until after we named them. Okay. 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 Um, we have to, before transplantation can happen, we have to compare HLAs from different people. And they have to match as closely as possible. Okay, the closer it is, the closer the match, the less risk for rejection. Okay, or the slower rejection is. Okay. Okay. Okay, transplants may be attacked by T cells, macrophages, and antibodies. Okay, um, there are types that are privileged, and privileged tissue do not cause an immune response. A great example is heart valves. Like heart valves are completely replaceable. Like so, you can use like cow valves and sheep or pig valves. Okay. Um, corneal transplants. There's no blood going to the cornea, so corneal transplants work. Okay, the rejection is very it's there. It's not like it's not there. It's just very slow. Okay, okay, all right. We'll skip the stem cells. Okay, okay. Bone marrow transplants. Okay, um, is to treat leukemias and other blood disorders, but you run the risk of graft versus host disease. Okay, so if you take out, so if someone was suffering from leukemia, they have to destroy their whole bone marrow system, and then get a infusion of bone marrow from some other person. Okay, that some other person's bone marrow can actually attack the original uh, person with leukemia. Okay, and that is graft versus host disease. Okay. Okay. So graphs, make sure you understand these four types of graphs. Okay, autograft is self-graft. Isograph is the use of identical twin tissue. Obviously, these two are the best things to use. However, you don't. There's not a lot of like possibility of a heart autograft or isograph, really, because you know you only have one heart. This problem is being solved quickly with stem cells that can grow in your heart and stuff like that. And you can use an autograft because it's technically your tissue. You just grow a new one from your stem cells. Okay, allografts are used tissue from another person. Xenografts are use of non-human tissue, and they must overcome the hyperacute rejection response. It's not normal for the body to take foreign tissue like that. The only exception, again, being heart valves, because heart valves are immunoprivileged. Okay. All right. We'll skip the. Okay. Okay. So cancer cells are removed by immunosurveillance. Okay. Cancer cells have tumor antigens that mark themselves, and if the T cells can find them, they can actually kill them. Okay. Okay. So there you go. That's a CTO. Okay. Okay. Immunodeficiencies. Okay. Okay. So the two types of immunodeficiency, congenital is you're born with it, acquired, developed over time. Okay. So this mouse is called a nude mouse. Basically, they have no immune function. So you inject them with a tumor, you can see it grow, right? And that's useful, right? So these things will never survive in the wild. They'll be dead in a day or two from all the shit they pick up. Okay. Okay. So the obvious one I want to talk about is AIDS. Okay. Um, okay. In 1981, there's a cluster of cases of pneumonia, or Kaposi sarcoma, and a loss of immune function discovered in a group of young homosexual men in San Francisco. Okay. Um, Originally, this disorder was actually called GRID, gay-related infectious disease. Okay, or immunodeficiency. Yeah, GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency. Okay, they thought it was only in gay men, etc. Okay, what they realized in 1983 was that there was a virus causing immune function, loss of HIV, loss of immune function, and that by targeting helper T cells. Okay, and they named it HIV. Okay, and then they named the disease AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Okay. Okay. Um, HIV, the origin is HIV. Okay, so in the early 1900s, what we did in Africa was we chopped down a great deal of forest, and we did it using relatively primitive methods like machetes and stuff like that. Okay, the animals that were caught in that forest, we usually butchered it as meat, and we sold it as bush meat. Okay, and the most likely story is that when people were chopping up this bush meat with machetes, they accidentally cut themselves, and their blood mixed with the blood of chimp. Okay, because chimps also do have HIV, except it's called SIV in chimps, simian immunovirus. Okay, um, SIV is not nearly as lethal in chimps. They usually live with it. Okay. Okay. So it then spread throughout Africa as a result of urbanization and increased sexual promiscuity. Okay. You can see these cases from early. Okay. Um, so HIV-1 arise from Africa. HIV, there's also HIV-2 as well. That seems to be a little bit more confusing where it came from, possibly baboons. Um, okay. But the important case is HIV-1. Okay. Um, and what clarify, HIV seems to be um, in the US highly correlated to gay men. But that's not true for most of the world, and that's no longer as true for the United States. Okay, in most places around the world, HIV is usually transmitted through heterosexual sex. Okay, all right. So the structure of HIV will skip. Okay, okay. The effectiveness. Okay, okay. So what happens is HIV takes advantage of the CD4. Remember, T helper cells all have CD4. So they take advantage of CD4 and this co-receptor called uh, CXCR4, CCR5. Okay, and that allows the HIV to enter. If you're missing CCR5, then you're largely immune to HIV, and there are people who are largely immune to HIV. Okay. 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 And so what happens once you're infected is you make a provirus and you start making new HIV virons and they pop out of the cell. Okay. 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 There are three phases of HIV. Okay. One is um, asymptomatic or lymphadenopathy, the swollen lymph nodes. Okay. But a lot of, so you also tend to strike a fever first. But, you know, if anyone named a disease that causes a fever, there's about 3 million of them. So, and obviously, if you have a fever, you think zebras and not horses, and you just got a flu or you got a fever from somewhere, something normal and not HIV, which is why most people kind of brush off the initial fever. Okay, the second phase is CD4 cells start to drop. Okay, so the flu comes in, you generate a response. Okay, that response kills most of the HIV cells or HIV virus. Okay, so it plummets. Okay, but since it's already infected, some CD4 cells, they'll stay around and they'll stay around and grow. Okay, and your body keeps trying to fight it off. But what happens when you try to fight it off is you end up losing T cells, and eventually that loss becomes more and more important until the point where you cross the threshold of you have less than 200 cells per microliter. That, by definition, is AIDS. And by then, you're no longer able to fight off normal diseases that other people fight off. Okay, here you're more susceptible to to a lot of diseases, but here you're not able to fight off normal diseases. Okay. Okay. So there you go. Impact of age, exposed but not affected the CTR5 population. Most of you guys probably are SOL on that one. It is Scandinavian, like I think it's Scandinavian in origin, and so like Scandinavian people have something like 10% chance of having that. Okay. 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 The diagnostic load. Okay. The diagnostic method is usually HIV antibodies or PCR, the plasma viral load, etc., etc. Okay. Okay. Um, okay. HIV transmission. So the route of transmission, sexual contact, breast milk. Um, it used to be blood, like originally before we started testing blood for HIV. HIV, there was a lot of blood transfusions of HIV. Okay. Organ transplants, artificial insemination, needles, etc., etc. Okay. Uh, Anal receptive intercourse is the most dangerous form of sexual contact. Okay. The reason simply because the epithelium of the anus is not designed for sexual contact. Okay. And therefore, there's usually more cuts and tears, and that leads to an easier route of infection. Okay. Okay. So there are as of this was 2009. There's 36 million worldwide infected. Most of it is in Africa, um, and parts of Southeast Asia, the poor parts of Southeast Asia. A lot of it is spread because of miseducation and also like toxic masculinity. Um, there's a lot of the whole wearing a condom is not real sex, and well, it's all this toxic masculinity thing that causes high rates of HIV infection in Africa. Okay. Okay. So the way to treat it simply is condoms, HIV testing, health services, sex education. Okay. Um, Understanding what HIV is. Okay. Uh, Now, okay. When I first heard of HIV, I can tell you the exact situation. Magic Johnson got HIV. That was when me and most of my generation heard of HIV. Okay, and at that time, it was pretty much like you had 7 years from the time your first diagnosis infected to kicking the bucket. Okay, Magic is still alive today. Um, he looks young. He looks healthy. He looks like he's still capable of playing point guard for the Lakers. Um, so, like, there's been huge advances in treatment. And Magic for actually brought a lot of attention to the disease, obviously, and that funded a lot of money into it, and that allowed us to find treatments. Okay, the most current treatment is the highly active antiviral therapy. Okay, what they do is they keep HIV in the system, but they keep it suppressed so low it doesn't cause symptoms. Okay, And so these are all the different things they do. Okay. And they do it basically the cocktail. They do all these things at the same time, and that keeps it very, very low, and it keeps it from mutating very quickly. If you treat it one, it'll mutate against that one thing very quickly, but you can't mutate against four things at a time. It's hard to do. Okay. Okay. So the challenges that developing HIV, this you can probably read. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I will see you for the next chapter.